Magic, do you have a place where I could like throw these buttons towards the them? I moved to this big board that was in the hallway. I think that's one you're talking about, right? Not this big giant thing over here.
No. No, dude.
Okay.
Okay,
You
good.
want to use this as a barrier? Because I found it.
Oh,
I just found it in the hallway. I thought it
well, very wet.
was anyway.
Oh.
Okay, well, I'll see. I mean, I could
What am I
always get
doing here?
food stuff at another time
Yeah,
from one till, I have some ones for after, just after one until I kind of at 4 and then around that Edgewood stuff.
yeah.
Could do that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, you're pretty good. Okay.
Teamwork.
Teamwork makes the dream work. Oh, those are so cute. So cute.
Oh, yeah, I don't know where the rest of them are standing.
Okay, Magic, I'm gonna take off.
Okay, I have something for you.
I'm all good, so. Whew. Oh my God, I need to eat.
Yeah, I do too. I'm still trying to eat. That's why I'm like, suck up some of the air.
I came up with, like, there's some, that push room looks pretty good. If you use this certain technique, just trust me, like, in the future, if you ever have to do it, it might be just my height, but I found this one technique that just works perfect.
What is the deal here?
That's it, that's her. Yeah, yeah, look at that.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, hi Maggie.
How's it going?
It's okay. How are you?
I'm hanging in.
Yeah. I started to feel like I was starting to get a few cracks in my exterior the past couple of weeks, like starting to feel like I'm kind of think I'm gonna lose it here.
I think I'm gonna lose it. I know I am in the process of losing it, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I feel like since it's me and you, Jen and I had a conversation today about how it's hard sometimes in this particular atmosphere to talk about being a parent because you don't want it to seem like our road is a tougher road than other people's. But the anxiety that my kids have is so heartbreaking, and my inability to project a brighter tomorrow is so depressing and heartbreaking. It's hard. It's just hard. I've got,
I imagine it's
well,
extra hard 'cause Luna's
Tommy,
old enough.
between you and I and all the other kids hanging out in your room and wherever David is,
The doors are locked. I'm all alone. It's my
oh my God, why don't
I don't have anyone crawling on my face.
you should fuck this meeting off right now and just go do something fun for you, I'm going to tell him, like, yeah, Maggie called, something happened, a meteor hit her house, and she cannot do this. So
Meteor totally did hit my house.
a metaphoric meteor hit Maggie's house. Yeah. No, it's just hard times. Yep.
Yeah, is Kazoo talking about trying to do in-person classes?
Oh, they are. They're talking about, a mix of physical at home teaching or physical in the school and then at home. And we're struggling because we struck out swinging on at home. It did not happen at our house. It was too much. It was all of the negatives and all of the pressure and anxiety of school with none of the release and none of the peer fun that makes school tolerable when you don't want to be there.
It's all the bad things and none of the good
All the
things.
bad things, all the pressure and all the stuff that makes you feel bad about yourself because you're not doing whatever it is you're supposed to do. But you're also not getting that feedback from peers I just feel for the kids. I feel, either in any given day, one of the two of my kids is struggling, but in between you and I, Tommy has had a really hard time. He really wants us to be strict adherers of social distancing and masks and all that, which because he's scared. And so that means that he doesn't feel comfortable riding bikes with kids in the neighborhood. And even at the pool, he struggles with are we safe? And it's, part of me, we're as safe as we pretend we are, but so he's struggling. He's not getting that interaction with it. And he's also 11 years old. Like your kids, they're just going through the day-to-day trials and tribulations of being a young person in a fucked up country.
God, I tell you, Steve, I can't hardly talk to my friends and family back home. I can't hardly talk to them.
I found myself
It just hits me in the face so hard that it's.
I found myself avoiding talking to my parents mostly because I didn't have anything new to say, and I just was like, I didn't want to say, hey, your son's struggling because I'm getting depressed with this shit,
I totally chewed. Last time I talked to my dad, I totally chewed him out. Oh my God,
Did
it was
you?
terrible. I was so. He called Dave's phone, and I answered because Dave was busy, and he called because he needed some data because he has this one friend who's like a total right-wing nut in Canada, who's been his friend forever, who made some stupid statement about how Black people should just shut up and deal with it because the majority of them are recent immigrants who are not descended from slaves, so they came there willingly, so they should just shut up and take it because they came there willingly. And I just lost it on him.
Yeah.
And here's my dad trying to be the good guy, right? My dad's not the guy saying the stupid thing. Dad's the guy trying to rebut it. And I start yelling at him and I start crying. And I'm like, Dad, if you need me to give you data to rebut the fact that your own granddaughter deserves to exist, I don't know how to talk to you.
Right.
My poor old dad didn't know what the hell to say. And
I was talking to Sarah Drummond. I said, I think it seems like our roles have reversed with me and my own parents. And I am struggling to just be patient with them as they just go through this stuff. My mom's in a different boat, but my dad just sits and watches MSNBC all day and just gets furious. And
gets all wound up.
15 years ago, I would have told him to his face, get out of your house, go do something. And now I'm like, he can't. What can you do?
Yeah.
What can you do? Oh, all right. People are coming.
Oh, good.
Yeah. We'll
Put
see.
the game face on.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
When I first got on here and I saw Zanaya was waiting, I was like, Zanaya's waiting?
You know what? At least it doesn't say Zanaya is cool, which is what she usually makes her name plate on.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen Zanaya cruising around. Seems like doing okay.
She is a little bit, but she's also, I swear to God, Steve, I've about called you about 4 times this week because she is totally hitting puberty and I don't know what to do with her.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't know why, I'm so upset. I was like, it's hormones. How do I explain
It's
this?
hormones. It's hormones. Yeah.
But then of course she's also crazy and hormonal and tied on a string to her 2 sisters.
Yeah, all of us tough.
It's so hard. There's no space. She can't
Yeah. What are they talking about at El Sol? What are they thinking about for them?
God, Steve, we're in the middle of we just today, me and Catherine and Emily, I can't name myself. Oh, I'm typing on the wrong computer. God, it gets me every time. name. Keep typing I've probably been sending my name as a message to someone on Slack in the group about making masks. I look extra crazy now. Oh God. You know, I mean, it's all the same stuff of KPS. We've had no direct communication from Dr. Wilson, but I don't blame her because she's at home with a new baby, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. You were probably already, did I put that up? I don't know. I have no name. There we go. Did I spell my name right? Yes. Okay. I'll put that in the win column today. Yeah, but I know, I mean, I'm really worried because I think that we have some people who have to go back to work.
Yes.
Who are going to be all about in-person classes. I know that school does not have the bandwidth. Like there's just, if they do, so they're putting forth, right, the full, they've got 3 options that they're polling parents about. You've probably gotten all the million persistent phone calls about it, right?
Yes.
And if they try to do a full day, 5 days a week, it's going to be a basket of bad, right?
Yeah. Yep. Totally.
And if they do the hybrid, they'll probably be able to make some of it work. But we have a group of parents that are leaning towards just keeping their kids home, because it's the right thing to do and we can do it in terms of, you know, overall public health, but recognizing that, like, holy hell, this is hard and it's really hard on our kids. But at El Sol, if we do that, where are they going to get any Spanish language exposure?
Oh, yeah.
And how are they going to reintegrate? And beyond that, we start pulling that thread and you're like, well, what's going to happen to the school?
Yeah.
Are they going to lose all the dollars that would have been on the head of the kid that would have went to their school? How are they going to float that? Are they going to fire teachers? Are they going to consolidate smaller schools together to keep full classes if they have enough parents that say they're going to do online? Like, what are the broader implications of that? And if we're no longer part of that school, if all the affluent parents keep their kids home, what happens to places like PTO that tends to be predominantly run by the more affluent parents who have the bandwidth to do that? Then there's none of that extra funding and support. Yeah. So I started to really like it. So we made a poll in English and Spanish because their Spanish outreach was shit. They did their open house thing and they said there was going to be, there was no Spanish. There was no translation. There was not a live stream. If there were 0 instructions on how to get to it. And any instructions that were given were all in English. So if you were someone who needed that, you wouldn't have known how to access it anyway. But as far as I could tell, it wasn't even there.
Wow.
And they got rid of their bilingual support person, like the person that was in charge of like ESL and all of that stuff. That person is gone. That's one of the 10 positions they eliminated because that person was retiring. So they're just picking low-hanging fruit. And instead of firing people, anybody who can retire and is retiring, they just don't replace them. So now there's no bilingual person at admin. So we're like, we really got to put it out there so that our parents can at least have a voice. So now we're just today sent in a big letter with like a 50 respondent survey of our parents and what we thought was important, and tried to kind of bring up some of those issues of like, how are you going to maintain a dual language program in a virtual learning environment? And are our children who choose, families that choose online learning, virtual learning for their students, for their children, how are they going to have any connection? Because that isolation is brutal. And if they no longer even have an online access to their classroom and their peers, how are we going to meet their needs? I don't know. I'm super concerned that they're going to be like, out of the box, boom, here's our one little version of online classes. It's completely a separate stream.
Right.
I don't know what I'm going to do if that's the option. And it's really hard to make the choice in this space of what that's going to look like.
No, I feel you. I'm sorry that you're in that spot. That's a tough choice.
Is Luna going to go back to physical classes, or what do you guys
really, I know that we're encroaching on business and meeting time here, but we're looking at Gull Lake has had a good online class, like they've been doing online classes for a little while, and we're thinking she would prefer not to go back to class. She's very anxious in the actual school itself. She enjoys not being there. So okay, Maggie, you and I will have to have a virtual
Yes.
or
Oh my gosh. Okay, so our executive.
an actual beer. This video is just confirming my suspicions that the weather makes my hair bigger and into Playmobil head. I
I want to see your Playmobil guy.
Me on the bench.
You should make him your like avatar.
Me at park. I'm gonna shut the door here because we got folks are getting ready for the Youth Summer Mini Festival tomorrow.
Okay.
Hmm.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, there they go. Well, I guess we all have dog forgiveness here, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna pre-apologize again for this new world of having to have my dogs interrupt everything I do.
Okay.
I have not heard from Jared. Brendan did text me to confirm the meeting time about an hour ago. So
Okay. Brendan
hopefully he will
and
be
Jared
doing.
are joining us now.
Ah. Well, let's see. I'm gonna re-add the agenda into the chat because I think that doesn't populate until someone enters. So give me just a moment to do that.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Brendan. How are you?
Did you just say morning?
No, I said morning when I saw you this morning.
I thought you just said good morning, and I'm like, geez.
Good morning. Woo!
Are you just living in the vine now, or the office now?
Yeah, feels like it.
Okay, okay. Do it.
Jeremy.
Okay.
Spoken.
I just copied a agenda into the chat. It's really ambitious that we can go over 6, 7, 8 things in a half hour. I don't know that that is gonna work out, but we're gonna do the best we can. So let's get started with the updates. I don't think we'll need 5 minutes for each of these, but that was an estimate. Maggie, would you mind an attempt at timekeeping as you're doing minutes, since you generally log sort of time markers in those? You know, just whatever, you know, if we end up going way over for any particular thing, as best you can.
Let me go grab my phone and I'll do that.
Maggie, I can do it for you.
Well, thank you, Brendan.
Are we just doing like a 5-minute timer on each?
I've got a 5-minute estimate for each one, but you know, that's gonna put us over right off the bat. So the more we can trim off of there, the better. Updates. Steve, maybe you can start with kind of some details around the discussions that have been going on since last we met about the possibility of relocating our offices, our main offices, our community center, and rental rooms, some of them, over to the vacancy that has that we have at 80. What is it, 806, 805, 80? Thank you. Yeah.
800 something.
800
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, so Nova Virtual Reality, their lease expired at the end of last month, and they had made the decision that they would not renew. Jen and I, as we went into the building and we're kind of looking at what we might be offering as an opportunity for the community, it's a former building site of Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services. It's their former offices, so it's sort of set up like an office. And as we went in there, we realized like that it was probably a tougher fit to put someone in there than we had imagined. There's sensitivity, there's residents that are above that building, so you have to think about something that would go in there that could exist and be respectful with the tenants above. And the long and the short of it was we thought like that would be a much better, that could be a very suitable home for ourselves, for the VNA, and we could move over there. It's really set up nicely in terms of a reception area, which we've had conversations. People would like to see something like that. There's a very small little office that would be ideal for property management. There is an office that I would utilize, and then a boardroom that we would utilize. We've extended invitations to Gwendolyn and to Magic, and both have expressed interest in coming. We are sussing out the details in terms of what we would grandfather their rent in for the initial move, and then a board decision ultimately to figure out what rent would look like moving forward from there. It's this very serendipitous conversation we had, because at the same time, Jen was having conversations with the ARC disability advocates, I guess it is. And they had, well, it doesn't matter when I started, but they had previously had an office in this building, 814 Southwest Nidge, which is why the boardroom is accessible and the door is wider to accommodate wheelchairs, and they would like to come back. So it actually, Jen and I are crunching the numbers right now, and the VNA would take a hit, but we would take a hit anyway, trying to repair or trying to white box Nova so that it could be used for something else. This would be a significantly less hit, less of a financial hit. The VNA would move over with our partners into this new office where Teachers Assistant Union, Michigan Autism Society, and then they would share this space with the ARC advocates. So Jen is still kind of crunching the numbers on that, but I think when we spoke this morning, I want to say that we would be out $6,000 next year. That would be the loss on our pro formas had that unit rented for what I think it was $2,100 a month. So, so we're looking at how we would structure that so that it would be equitable and fair, but eventually moving back up to kind of offset that loss. So it's really it's got a beautiful outlet, like a beautiful layout for an office, but because it was used for virtual reality, the rooms are all soundproof and have heavy foam on them. The floors are sound. There's a lot of work to do before we can move in. One of the things that's nice about disability advocates is that their lease is up in the spring, I believe. So they too are looking long-term at how what improvements they would need to make in this office. But we really like it so far. We've had good conversations with Gwendolyn and Magic, and we feel very optimistic that this would be a good move for us moving forward. And continue to put this building, 814, in the hands of folks that provide services for the community, and that would be good allies and resources for the neighborhood.
Yeah, and just to kind of add a note of context to that as well, that $6,000 loss that you mentioned is a fraction of what we estimated in this annual budget for that space.
Yes.
And also the overage in that line item could be kind of considered to offset the investment that we would be making into a refurb of that space, which I think we also got. We got an estimate. I don't remember the exact dollar value last week, but it was somewhere, maybe, Brendan, do you remember that amount?
Hit the 5.
Sorry?
We hit the 5 minutes, just so you know.
Oh, thank you. It was, I want to say it was maybe in the 5,000 or 6,000. Maybe it was like 3 or 4. It was somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000, which honestly, for a space of that size, especially compared to the idea of refurbing our current space, is a pretty good value, I would say, and kind of gives us an opportunity to be able to do that with a little bit less downtime of having to actually be stuck in the space while that's going on. You know, we would still be able to continue operations in our current space until those refurbs were completed, be able to move into there and really not have any lag time in between. So there's a lot of pluses to that.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, no, that was about all I wanted to add on that note.
I just was wondering, what's the $6,000 difference? Is it mainly just less rent from?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were paying $2,100 in rent, and then Gwendolyn and Magic, if they were to come over, pay, I think collectively $300 or maybe $350. So there would be that loss over time. I know that some places do pay rent themselves, like, you know, they'll pay. I'm struggling with how to say it. We could pay rent to ourselves, and that would, but I don't know what the.
Well, is it less rent that we'd be getting out of our current space? Is that the issue?
It's more rent than we would be getting out of 814 would produce more rent, but it would not offset the loss of it would not.
So that's the total loss when you calculate 814 and 806 together, with estimated income from leasing the new 814 to disability advocates and the 3 rental offices in our presumed new spot over there. You're talking like that. Would that be accurate? That estimate is taking on all of that together. We would make a little bit more at 814, but we would make a little bit less out of our cumulative office rentals than we do currently at 814 by moving them over to the new space. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other kind of questions or discussion about this? I think it's something to just kind of propose to the board. I'm prepared to endorse the move personally, and I think it's really an operational decision that's best made by our staff, but I don't really see many drawbacks to the idea of that, other than, you know, it's a lot of work, and it's kind of something to ask and add to the shoulders of the people who are going to have to be taking it on, but it also creates a lot of good opportunities kind of all around.
Yeah, I agree. I am going to send an email. I'm forwarding an email that Jen sent me earlier today that has some of these details in there and some of the.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to say that I think that in the current economy, it's going to be probably a little challenging to find a tenant even for that space that's going to pay $2,100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great point, Maggie. We met today with another tenant of ours whose lease comes up in the spring, and there's some you know, they love being here, but they don't know that retail is a viable option moving forward with what's going on in the country. And
yeah, for sure. Converting it to like service provider space is definitely more in line with our higher calling and probably more likely thing that we're going to achieve. Whereas the smaller rental places, especially the ones we're putting forth as like business incubators, I think are going to get more traction than a big business.
And as Steve mentioned this morning, disability advocates would not be able to occupy the other space were it to become the available unit, just because it's not an accessible space in a whole lot of different ways, where 814 has all the accessibility features that they would need. And so that's pretty appealing aspect of it, that we would really have a automatic prospective tenant for the space. And also, I guess, just kind of the offset or the potential loss of revenue there. You know, we really have to take that into consideration, along with, you know, what businesses are we fostering? What nonprofits are we supporting in our community? So it sounds like a pretty positive prospect for us.
Yeah, I think, and that the disability advocates have been here before, and they were excited about the potential of coming back. And when we purchased this building initially, we had conversations that deliberately sort of stayed away from other nonprofits. We wanted there to be things that generated foot traffic between the businesses. But I think Maggie brings up a really important and viable point at this time, that moving forward, we're just not exactly sure how viable retail is.
So unless there's any other discussion,
Is Building Blocks staying with the program?
Mm-hmm.
Building Blocks is Eddie. Building Blocks is not currently in the office. We will continue to work with Building Blocks, but really it was more of a connection personally through Eddie and Eddie's role on.
Oh, I thought they had an office space. Okay, thank you.
Quasi with Eddie here, yeah, sort of. But they have the Building Blocks' actual physical location is over on Stockbridge.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that Jen sent me a copy of an RFP for that space to put on the internet, which I did do.
Mhm.
So there is currently an active RFP
Yeah.
out on our website for 814. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that that was
For
814 or 806 or
Bounds for the
oh,
Vine.
yeah, sorry, the space we were just discussing, the western space.
So briefly, just to kind of update also on what we talked about with our sort of very, very graduated reopening strategy, and kind of where we're at with office hours and services and stuff.
Yes, so Sarah and I talked today. I mean, I've been up here. I've been having Tuesdays and Thursdays as regular business days here all day, and then been coming up throughout the week. And we talked about what the reopening would look like if we were to post things on the board, on the door, so that it was clearly stated, like, we will be going to meetings, to scheduled, I'm struggling again. People will have to phone and make a, for lack of a better word, like a reservation or an appointment, I guess is the proper term, and we'll accommodate them in that way. But we've been up here and trying to figure out how to safely do it, because we do have a lot of folks coming in and out, and we're getting our signage put up so that people are aware that they have to be wearing masks. But I think that the way Edison isn't open yet, North Side isn't open yet, East Side is going strictly through appointments at this point. So I think that that's a fair option. And I don't know that we'll be overwhelmed with appointments, but hopefully having it on the door there will at least be welcoming and
Yeah.
opportunity.
And that's not to say that we couldn't have availability for even like walk-in style appointments.
Yes.
If you happen to be available and there,
Yeah.
but just some way where you can kind of document like people who are physically coming into the building and when, and
Yes.
Especially those kind of
That's a
precautionary
crucial
steps
component, is
for
trying to
now.
keep track of who has come
for the
in
foreseeable future.
for health purposes, yeah, and safety purposes. Yep.
Any questions about any of that? That's also kind of a system that would really be relatively easy to maintain as we undergo a big move of the kind that we're talking
Yes.
about. And then that brings us to some stressful developments that we need to kind of bring to a little light tonight. And we don't really have all of the information yet that hopefully will be forthcoming by the time we meet next week.
Yeah.
But we did get a distressing letter from the IRS. I'm not sure what that letter was dated. It was right before, the timing was really bad with a whole lot of things around that time, actually. But I believe, Steve, you said it was right before you left for
Yeah.
that week
Yeah.
at the end of June and through the beginning of July. So very recently. As was updated in, maybe it was last month or the month before, that our tax filings had fallen behind for the previous years, but that Sean Kraft filed the 2018, 19, and 20 taxes trying to confirm the filing date and get a receipt for that filing submission at this point. But we got a letter stating that the IRS presumably, hopefully, and in all likelihood, due to a lot of backlog with filings, along with extensions of deadlines and probably an overwhelming amount of sort of last minute stuff. As we know, the actual tax filing date is tomorrow instead of April 15th, that the tax exempt status, we got a revocation of tax exempt status for our 501c3, which is a pretty dire letter to get, but hopefully we'll be able to be resolved and rescinded or, you know, retroactively corrected.
Yes.
There's a possibility we may have to go through an appeal process, but we don't really have a very satisfying, picture of how this will play out yet.
Now, I went immediately after I got the letter. I took the letters to Sean Kraft so that he could write a response. He seemed to feel that I was mortified and just heartbroken over the dereliction of my own personal duty on this. He seemed to feel that that this was not an insurmountable challenge and that we would write this response, and that if that didn't happen, that we would go through. He had another terminology or another term for reapplying if you've already had your nonprofit, but he made it seem like this was just going to be a technicality. I feel confident that we'll get it sussed out, but in the interim, I'm not exactly sure what that looks like at this point.
So we had this happen before at the Eagles in Coldwater
Oh,
because we were behind in our tax filings and our 501c was placed on a suspension.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were brought up to date, we actually had it revoked. And then once it was all cleared up, we ended up getting it back with the understanding that we had to stay up to date further on or going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually part of their protocol.
Yeah.
If they're following the same way that they did it, this was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
This
And
was the same process we went through.
yeah, my understanding is that the Douglas Neighborhood Association went through the same thing a few years back, and that the city was actually like very understanding and kind of held their hand through the process of reinstatement and getting it all corrected and everything. So I don't think we're really gonna run into any other roadblocks or hurdles with any of our partnerships, things like that. But Steve is probably gonna have to spend a whole lot of time on this process in the near future.
Is the reason given for the revocation that we were in or had not filed our taxes in a timely way?
yes, and that we had missed a year in there too. So some of it, as Sarah mentioned, was like I suspect that this letter, our revocation letter, was sent out prior to them realizing, like, we have sent the taxes that they want. We just didn't get it in before they sent this letter out. So I feel good knowing that we've already made some corrective actions, but I think part of it is COVID and part of it is just the mean tax season, and the timing was not good.
Well, I imagine people have applied for their tax number or have applied for taxes who don't traditionally do so, because that's the only way to get the stimulus package too. So they probably,
Right,
in addition to their own scheduling stuff and their own staffing stuff, they also will kind of have extra,
So
probably because of that.
in theory, this letter would automatically generate for anyone who falls into the category of lapsing 3 consecutive years of tax filings. We didn't actually lapse 3 consecutive years of tax filings. We did lapse 2 years of tax filings, but we did file all 3 returns this year. And so in theory, it should be correctable, at worst appealable, and able to be reinstated, but it's gonna be a whole process for that. So yeah, and I guess I just I want to reiterate some of the stuff I said to Steve this morning, which is that I know that if I were in his shoes right now, I would be putting myself through the ringer and feeling the full weight and burden of this very unfortunate situation. But I just want to reiterate that this is the result of really an entire sort of system failure that really kind of took a lot of pieces all coming together, where it's quite obvious that, you know, there were a lot of things that kind of had to happen over the course of a while to lead up to this point. And I just want to I want to offer that we consider the fact that, you know, we don't need to point fingers at this time, or really even allow our awesome executive director to try to put all of the burden of that on his shoulders, because this definitely this started actually before any of us were even really in positions of leadership, you know, on the board. So
Well,
we're kind of, I guess we also kind of talked about trying to retrace some of those steps and really try to figure out, like, we're not even totally clear on how kind of the origin story of this problem arose. But maybe if we can get a little bit of clarity on that whole timeline, we can get to the point of coming up with a really good strategy just to prevent any possible future systemic failures like that. One thing that I want to bump up into our line of sight is for either next month or the following month after that, for our working kind of breakout session during this executive committee meeting to focus on the creation and drafting of a annual board calendar, which I think is something that's really going to be a check in the system for us. So let's go quickly forward through a few more items and then get to what I think we've got some new attendees joining us for. Quick note, just that tomorrow, the VNA is hosting the BAM Direct Action and Supply Drive from 5:30 to 8 p.m. There are a list of items to contribute for this drive. And if you'd like to volunteer or participate, I think Magic is the points person for this event. So yeah, please reach out to them. Probably through Facebook would be the easiest way. If you're not on there, then we who are can connect you. And Steve, I'm sure you have Magic's email address as well. Absolutely. I don't know if I do, but so lastly, just a quick another quick update for something that kind of I think came at you today or yesterday, Steve, from KDPS.
It actually came to me today after I was coming back from Bagel Greenery. I was stopped in the parking lot by, Assistant Chief Dave Boyson. And Boyson expressed some concerns about things that he thought were inaccuracies on our website, and wanted to extend an invitation from Chief Carrie Ann Thomas to make a presentation to the VNA board, which is about 3 hours long, he said, that would have PowerPoints and videos that would refute is my word, this is not his word, but would explain, I think the 3 incidents that he mentioned were the tear gassing on the mall. Oh gosh, there were 2 other things that, he mentioned Lakeside and said they didn't have anything to do with it. And
then the raid of the home.
The search,
warrantless way
at 100 West Vine. So it was a tense conversation where I told Dave kind of where we stand and where we were coming from, and our desire to serve the community and to offer a platform and to be a voice for folks in the community. And I certainly didn't make any sort of promises about us doing anything, not jumping through any hoops for KDPS at this time. Sarah and I talked almost immediately after my encounter with Boyson in the parking lot And what we came up with, that we thought was appropriate, was rather than taking us all en masse down to Crosstown Parkway, which was what they wanted to do, what I would do would be to write to the chief and ask for the presentation. And then if we watched the presentation and we decided that this was something we wanted to follow up on, that we would try to set up a Zoom meeting for the chief and whomever else KDPS thought that they needed at their side of the table. So.
Right, so the invitation was for us as a board and staff to physically attend a 3-hour PowerPoint presentation giving alleged clarification to some of the points that they raised issue with. I hope that I have the support of the board in having kind of taken the liberty to speak on our behalf to say that if they would like to present us with any information, they're welcome to do that in a safe and digital format for us to review in advance of what we would consider as a future use of our physical time, which would maybe be more in the form of a dialogue rather than a lecture. And I kind of think we could maybe leave it at that for now and see if they're willing to provide us with the information that they are claiming to have. If anybody has anything to add to that response, I definitely would be, I think, be super open to suggestions, but I don't want to really take up a ton of our time with this at the moment.
If they're not willing to give the material, I'll go and listen to the 3-hour presentation and record it for everybody. Because I love PowerPoint. Nothing says read it to the blind guy.
Ultimately,
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Steve, do you mind, just a point of record keeping, could you please tell me the name of the person who made that invitation to you?
I think
Like,
he
get it right in minutes.
he had new brass on his shoulders. His name is Dave Boysen, Boysen, and I think he is the assistant chief. He's gotten some sort of promotion recently. So
If we sent our blind board member to go watch their PowerPoint, I think that would be a real big statement.
yes.
For me.
Ultimately, this was couched in the desire of like, we have been good community partners. We want to continue to be good community partners. We would like you to see what KDPS, this is our version of what happened. I'm gonna put that on the table.
And that
Aaron.
I'm
Hi.
right about
Hello.
exactly what is on our website that
Well, I asked.
Oh,
I said
so
there were people
It's
that-
basically in response to our published statement that we made against.
if they took that personally, I think that says a lot more about where they're perceiving the problem to be.
Definitely.
If you're mad at us because we don't want children being killed in care facilities and you take that personally, I feel like you are showing us where your mindset is, and that's a problem.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Hi.
Aaron.
No, you're totally fine. I have a lot to say about that I'm not going to say. What I am going to say is, Sarah and Steve, I would love to know if the PowerPoint they'd like to show us is the one that was shown at the 6:15 City Commission meeting.
Yeah. I'd like
Because
to
if
know
it
that
is, I
myself.
imagine most of us have already seen it.
Yeah, I definitely already watched that, and it
Thank you.
definitely doesn't shed any light on the issue.
Yeah, would love to know if that's, and if it's a different PowerPoint, I am still personally not interested in hearing it. But if it's the same PowerPoint, would be cool to let them know that the majority of us, well, I shouldn't assume.
Along with
At least
Jeremy,
one
I
of us
also
have already
offered,
seen it.
oh, sorry. I also offered to review any material that they want to submit to us. I'm happy to review it, see if there's anything I'd like to highlight to the board, whether it's worth anyone's time to review any of it. But I definitely think that if they want to engage with us in a dialogue and allow sort of a Q&A, I think we probably would have some really robust questions to pose in that format. But let's not spend a whole lot of time on getting lectured any.
Yeah. I think it's a small point, but I do want to make the point that in my conversations with Officer Shank, he's never expressed any sort of concern about our murals or I think Ryan he's got his head, our conversations have been, how do we get to the table and have a conversation that incorporates all the voices that have not historically been there. And his conversations have never been, let me sell you on what the version of this Kool-Aid is. Like, I've never heard anything like that. So disappointing, and in the context of being in the parking lot, it was also disappointing. I feel very similar to what you've already said, Aaron and Sarah.
Yeah, I just want to also echo Aaron's sentiment again. I have no personal interest in hearing or seeing any of their propaganda at this point.
Yeah. Thanks, Jared.
Okay, let's go ahead and spend a quick minute returning to something that kind of came up also this morning in discussion, which is really getting something on the schedule for what we had proposed as a sort of a white caucus. I really would like to also kind of either in that discussion or in our board discussion, in some way discuss possibilities for kind of anti-racism trainings or activities that we can engage in specifically to kind of put ourselves to some specific tasks. And I unfortunately did not get a super comprehensive feedback from everybody on that scheduling attempt that was made round one. So I guess I wanted to kind of hear from people, and I'm glad we have quite a few people in the room at the moment. Just quickly, maybe a minute on a couple of facets of that. One, which is being able to, and actually, Jeremy, I apologize that I did not get back to you with an answer to your question, but I didn't really want to speak on behalf of us as a group on what exactly this White Caucus is going to consist of. What the format is going to be for that. I think those are all things that that we really need to maybe determine, because if we need to set, we definitely would need to set a facilitator up for that. I don't know if that would be somebody who would want to volunteer internally, or if we would want to hire an organizational facilitator. I think I'd be fine with either of those options, but wanted to take suggestions and discussion about that, along with, I guess, for lack of, I think I maybe only got, I'd have to look back. I think I got maybe a little over half of the availability, but so I kind of wanted to return to that for a second because it kind of stalled out a little bit, and I think we need to pick it back up and move forward with it. I don't feel comfortable volunteering myself as a facilitator for a White Caucus in our group. I would feel much more comfortable hiring somebody professionally than volunteering myself, but I know there are others among us who might be interested in facilitating something like that. I definitely could help as a co-organizer for the event.
I would be happy to facilitate if folks feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, you'd be great. I know that Damara's name was sort of bandied about, but I know that Damara is really busy right now. Mm-hmm. And I think Jennifer Dozma's name was brought up, but Aaron, I think you would be fantastic if you're willing to do it. Yeah,
for sure. I totally understand the thinking behind hiring somebody, and I think that is a really good option. At the same time, I've been reflecting a lot on what Remy said at our last all hands meeting, which was that we have the tools that we need, and we know what to do. And I would hate to delay the process, and I would hate to contribute to possible inequity by hiring somebody not fully vetted or putting money in a white person's pocket to do this work, etc. So with that in mind, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you, Erin. That's awesome of you to volunteer. I really appreciate that. And, you know, I've been participating in a White Caucus for a couple of years now, so I definitely could kind of help with some of the organizational aspects of that. And also, I guess I just wanted to, I don't really want to go through a round 2 of attempting to sort of take feedback on people's availability when that was kind of already attempted and didn't really go successfully through. I think maybe at this point, I'm just going to take the feedback that I did get from people. I'm going to apply that to the schedule for the week, for the upcoming weeks, and see the best thing that I can come up with. And as many people as can make it, we will do the best we can. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take that information and compile it and go from that.
Cool. I was one of the people that didn't respond because I was out of town for a couple weeks,
Oh.
but I'm sure I can make it work, whatever it is.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah.
We do have the 28th of this month is a kind of a bonus Tuesday that we don't have anything scheduled for. If we want to, in lieu of a board meeting, it's just an option. We'll just put it out there.
Thanks, Steve. That's a good point. We do have a lot of, yeah, we do have a lot of Tuesdays. And then lastly, something that has come up, and this is listed under action items. Something that has come up for at least the last year, if not maybe more like 2, in property management committee meetings is Jen's repeated ask for us to hire a more consistent, at minimum on-call, but possibly part-time maintenance person. And as a property manager, I just really kind of want to lift up how incredibly hard that can be. I actually don't even know how she manages to get these things done without having something like that available to her for the size of property that we have. And it's come up in discussion. We really haven't come up with any kind of counterpoints to the possibility of creating this position other than the expense of it. Obviously, part of the expense of it is going to be offset by the reduction in the piecework, the contract labor, and the hours that Jen herself has to devote to maintenance around our buildings. And part of it is going to be just an additional expense that personally I think is extraordinarily justified as a necessary expense for our operations. And so Steve and I at least agreed this morning to put it on our agenda for tonight and then bring it to next week's meeting, hopefully to endorse the creation of this position. I would like to suggest that our staff come up with an estimate, an estimated high-end annual payroll to devote to that position and number of hours per week. We've kind of already discussed all of these things quite a few times in the property management committee. So I know there are already some numbers. I can't call all of them to mind at the moment, but I want to say it was always somewhere between 10 to 15 hours per week that she was asking for an on-call or part-time maintenance. And so unless there are objections or, you know, with whatever other discussion people would want to contribute to that, I was going to think to put it on next week's agenda.
That sounds good. I think so. Essentially what we would be talking about is maybe reducing as line items on our or the move would be having money that's currently allotted towards contracted labor end up becoming part of the payroll line. Is that basically the budget shuffling that it would be?
Part of it, probably
I
part
don't
of
imagine
would
that-
be coming away out of contract labor, but quite honestly, my guess is gonna be that it is gonna add a little bit to our budget expenses for the year. It is going to dip in a little bit. We've been running like with an overage in our budget for a couple of years now, at least. I don't know how far back that goes. So we do have the leeway in there for this without going into the red. But it's going to partly dip out of contract labor, but part of it is really just going to be Jen having quite a bit more of her time and her mental bandwidth available to do the parts of her job that she is kind of more there and present and hired to do. So
I did want to say that we had talked, we do have the AmeriCorps worker. We have Nicole who's been plugging in at the events. We had talked about that potentially being a position that we funded in 2021 was an event coordinator. Internally, as we talked about this, we think that there's more merit at this particular time in getting a part-time maintenance person than there is a event coordinator with events maybe not happening. So
yeah, and then on top, sorry, and then on top of that, Steve, I think you also mentioned that you've heard some discussions from LISC that they're thinking of kind of washing out the AmeriCorps assignments from this year and renewing those for a future year when people are actually able to get something out of an events coordinator, because pretty much across the board, people got hard hit by, you know, they created these positions, these people got on the ground, and then just within a few months, they weren't able to do their jobs. And so it sounds like they might be willing to just reboot the whole thing for next year.
That's our hope, yep.
Hey, Steve, would this be something that we could partner with KNHS or Community Homeworks with to fund like
possibly. I think, Brendan, I think it's definitely worth kind of kicking the tires and figuring out, seeing that's a good place to start for sure.
Especially with like wanted labor, and even if it's just someone from those organizations trying to partner for extra hours or flex hours, it might be worthwhile.
Yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, I can say hiring maintenance personnel is extraordinarily difficult in this town. And if nothing else, we boldly advertise our positions within those two agencies and see if they can help connect us to the right person for the job. So.
Brendan, this community homeworks meeting is not tomorrow, it's the next Wednesday, is that right?
Yeah, it's next Wednesday. I thought was it in the evening or?
It changed to the afternoon, to 1:30.
The afternoon, yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion on any of the rest of our agenda before we kind of recess into our working session for any additional
I just had
questions?
two things to bring up, and maybe to bring up at next week's meeting.
Thanks, Brendan.
It would be, I ran across another nonprofit that had an equity officer. I think that's something we might want to consider of, you know, someone, it should be all our jobs to think of equity issues, but maybe it's someone who that's their permanent piece through and through as our equity officer. I thought it was an interesting take and an interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to explore that more.
Yeah, and then another thing is, and maybe it's for next week's board meeting, but the city is interested in partnering on a community compost event. And we're starting to collect stuff for it from the hospital. And on behalf of the VNA, I just had acted and are working to kind of move things through. So just to have that on people's radar.
Thanks, Brendan.
There's rumblings about some people in the neighborhood wanting to do a yard sale. So I just wanted to throw that at us as something that we might engage with, because it's something we've done a lot in the past. So, and it's like actually kind of a good social distancing way to like go shopping and be a community, which is a hard thing to do right now, right?
For sure.
Yeah, my neighbor was actually asking about that the other day. Are we doing the neighborhood sale this year? Thought, well, we'd have to kind of probably do it in August like we used to do, but.
Yeah, some people have already put a date up of when they're doing it. I'll dig it up on my Facebook feed and bring it to you to put on the agenda, maybe, Sarah.
I'm going to be, I already forwarded to most of us. I'm going to forward as well to Aaron B and Aaron H right now. The original draft of the RFP policy. Sorry for not getting that out sooner. Probably just to everybody, but this is the one from earlier last year, early in the year, that Jared drafted for specifically for commercial vacancies. Now, I am going to post into the chat right now something that kind of came from trying to think of this this drafting of an RFP policy. It really just kind of led to the realization that I don't know that we have one RFP policy. I think that what we have as an organization are a set of different policies that apply to the different functions of our operations. There are 5 of those that I just posted into the chat. I think that we can probably focus our time and energy tonight on the most timely of these, which is that RFP for our commercial rentals and filling those rentals and selecting tenants for those commercial rentals. But at the same time as that, I think just as importantly, we're really lacking in policies to provide and guarantee equity, but also just basic fairness, kind of legal oversight, just all the due diligence that our organization should have in place for managing the property that we manage, and being able to create these policies through an equity lens. I think we could probably just go one by one down the list. We also are lacking in a resident selection plan for our residential vacancies. We are lacking in a procurement policy for our contract bids, which no matter how much we want to kind of look at those as 2 sides of RFPs, those are 2 really different processes when it's looking at identifying a contractor versus identifying a commercial tenant. You really need 2 separate policies for those 2 things. We also have, public projects and installations that aren't necessarily bids. They're not necessarily going to be contracts. Sometimes we're going to be maybe we're going to be taking on a relationship with somebody who's going to have a public art installation on our building. And that's not necessarily the kind of contract that falls into, a procurement policy. But we do need to have equitable guidelines for that process too. We also have, and I think this is one that I've been thinking about a lot lately, as far as like, what can we do both in the light of like this pandemic economic crisis that we're in, and with the sort of social uprisings that are going on right now, what can we do as an organization to serve our community towards those targeted or targeting the people who are needing our supports. And our fiduciary relationships is another really important piece of that. And so who have we formed fiduciary relationships with in the past? How do people find out about those? How do they know what opportunities they have for us to provide fiduciary oversight for their budding organizations and stuff? What is our capacity? How many of those can we take on at a time? And what is a time frame that we want to look at for helping people get on their feet? So we really lack policies for all of these things, and they are all really key parts of having equity in our organization. So I just wanted to kind of put all that out there as a bigger context, and see if there's any sort of suggestions, discussion that people would have around the idea of just kind of picking one, starting with one, and then checking them off and moving down the list and just, you know, focusing on getting these things done and doing the work that we already know, like you said, that we need to do. Starting with commercial rentals. Maybe we don't want to start with commercial rentals, you know, so little discussion.
We just put out an RFP for a unit, and I posted it to Black Wall Street and got a little feedback. Someone said they were really excited.
Yes.
And then we're like, how do I write a proposal? Oh man, somebody help me. So I directed them to Lincoln Crocker at the SBDC. But then someone next commented that our neighborhood is not friendly to Black-owned businesses. So I'm not putting that forth as a solution, but sort of offering it up as my own experience of trying to reach that space of trying to informally push it into the places we were trying to go with equity, and realizing that we have some work to do on the ground with our own reputation. And when we met a million years ago to talk about this the first time in quarantine time, I want to lift up Jeremy's suggestion that changing the name to making it open for bids or something like that would be better, because even just the acronym and the wording request for proposals is a gatekeeping procedure. So maybe having a thing where we change the name, and when we make a request for bids or putting something out for bids, and maybe including contact for things like the SBDC, like, hey, we want everybody to come. We want it to be equitable. If you have concerns about how to grow your business this way, check out this resource. I mean, is that an inappropriate thing to put in a proposal request?
No. I think that's the role of the neighborhood of the association, and something like that is if we are making an offer and putting it out there to the public, and the public is telling us, this is great, I don't know how to do it, then it tells me that we have to do workshops or something here to invite Lincoln and whomever to do something here and say, we're going to be running a workshop on how to do this. I agree with you entirely. I think that the RFP in itself, the initials are gatekeeper lingo that could be a turnoff immediately if you're not familiar with that. And when we tell folks, potential residents, and they get kind of, we spoke with someone today, like, oh, an RFP, and I said, this is not an Harvard Law School application. Give us an idea of what you want to do, and we'll work with you on that. But it is an intimidating premise for some folks right out of the hop.
Also, when we put something out like that, by saying like, we're putting this out and we're going to offer this, we have to have in place what we're going to offer and have it ready by the time that like in the time frame that, like, if your proposal is due in 2 weeks, we should have something lined up with some sort of workshop available and know that, like, prep it ahead.
Yep, I agree.
So I think, go ahead, Maggie.
Just kind of building off what Aaron just said. One thing that happens with CDAC is when with the Community Development Advisory Board, when we're doing a grant process, the first step is to come to a meeting to learn about how to do it. And maybe that's something we should think about, like having a process, like you're saying, where, hey, we're having an informational session about how to get this space. I don't know how easy that would be to implement in COVID times, but hopefully we're planning for things that will be in place after COVID times.
Yeah.
So the SBDC holds periodical like how to start a business lectures and educational events. I'm not sure where they're holding them these days, but it'd be really simple to just offer up our space as a location for that to occur, just right off the hop. Just say, Lincoln's, do you have an interest in hosting those through us? And maybe maybe currently it's something like setting up a Zoom feed and just hosting it through our system, or but as things sort of return to a more physical normal, I think that's a really easy way to get some of that information disseminated into the community.
Maybe even do like a hybrid, very limited space if you don't have access in whatever space, if it's big enough where people can be socially distanced, and have it on Zoom as well as like spaces for seating. If that feels safe enough.
Yeah.
I guess I just want to maybe propose the possibility that having a professional, kind of executive-minded white man offer a instructional proposal workshop to the public might not really be the most targeted approach to reach a different kind of audience from the ones that we're kind of trying to branch away from by rethinking this process. And as much as I love Lincoln, and as much as he cracks me up, I just don't see a very diverse group of people looking at that prospect and engaging meaningfully that way. But but at the same time, I kind of like want to kick myself for kind of, you know, being somewhat critical of a proposal and not really having good answers to propose as far as, well, what is what does the workshop look like, and who does run the workshop, and how do we get the right people to engage, and how do we break into new networks? And I'm sure this group has better suggestions about all those things.
Say, could we teach the class and offer like a grant or scholarship fund? So you're actually writing your own bid for a charitable organization, or that way they're learning how to write this actual bid, say for $200 or $500 to the food bank, and actually do a competitive bid for as a teaching tool, but there actually be a reward or an outcome for it.
So what's kind of interesting in this conversation, it seems like we're trying to take in inequitable policies and all these systemic problems that we're dealing with and trying to solve them as well. And it seems like what we could do is, you know, just have more of an open mindset of whatever anyone wants to submit, or having a way to reach out to more people and understand and help them in some ways. Because I think the Small Business Association, I mean, it seems like they can help people give a product that most people want. And I think what we need to do is kind of figure out a way to have our eyes open to more people, and then whatever they bring to the table, and help them bring to the table what we need in order to lift them up. So that's where I would like to see is, you know, if there's any way to like show all the units we have potentially for sale, the services, the contract services that we have open. And, you know, anyone could bid at any time or anything like that. And we could help evaluate bids or things like that, or some way that we can get more of a flow through where people know that we're potentially looking for these things. Because it seems difficult to reach out and reach to everyone if we're just looking at a specific time period or a specific area to say, hey, at this point we need something. How many contractors can we reach out to? How many business people can we reach out to? But if we do it retrospectively and have a bigger lens on what we're looking for, maybe we'll cast a wider net.
For lack of a lot of material out there in the public as far as, you know, equitable RFP processes and procedures, which Steve and I have both, I think, spent a bit of time kind of scouring the internet for. and coming up mostly with like vaguely connected pieces of information. What I've really come upon a lot that has been a little bit helpful in that process have been like city procurement processes, and a lot of cities kind of coming up with some or being challenged to instate more equitable procurement processes at the city level. And I can't remember if it was maybe Boston or one of them that made sort of some very specific requirements to create a more equitable procurement process for city contracts. One of those things being that pretty much any availability, any bids for projects, and theoretically in our case, you could kind of combine any kind of available partnerships, available projects, available contracts, bids, available art space, installation space, and available commercial or residential units and leases into a kind of permanent and ongoing and regularly updated directory that isn't just an RFP that gets posted for 10 or 15 days or something, but is really just a complete list. Here's what we're soliciting for out in the community, and if you're interested in this, approach us, just start a conversation. And that it's as simple as that, just kind of an online directory of opportunities. And this could be something that we add as a feature on our social media as well. And I think kind of speaks to that element of like creating different pathways for people who are going to maybe be interested and then say, how the hell do I do a business proposal that's what you're wanting? Or how do I convince you that I'm the artist that you want to feature? And really maybe it starts with a conversation at our kind of community level organization. So that was something that's kind of, I think a couple of people, maybe related to what a couple of people have mentioned as a possibility. I think these are all really like, I think we kind of jumped into the working aspects of this. I don't want people to think that this was really just an idea of like drafting a very specific ABC policy, but I really think that having robust discussions about the marketing and outreach of our projects and our relationships is like maybe the most key of all the pieces of revising these policies or drafting these policies. And I'm trying to take notes of these things. I'm sure Maggie's going to have better notes than me, but maybe after this session, we can compile all of that and use people's really good ideas that are coming out right now and put those things together.
I would just say with whatever policy or whatnot policies we come up with, yeah, we can try to make them as simple and easy as possible for people. I think that's more fair and open to majority of people, because we might not even think of some things or how people want to submit their proposals or things like that as well. So, if people want to submit them electronically, in person, or however, I think we just have to kind of keep things more open versus traditional of what we specifically need. If it's like a specific proposal around something, maybe we need more information and we can ask them for that, but just keeping our eyes open to other people and other ideas.
I think having a discussion specific to kind of the RFP or whatever we end up wanting to call it, policy for commercial rentals, kind of the rubrics of that can really be applied to all of these different policies, or at least pieces of that. I think it's going to really create the bulk of the framework through which to look at creating all of those different policies. But I really want to encourage everybody to kind of return monthly for the foreseeable future to our executive committee working sessions, which are going to consume at least the last half hour to an hour of every executive committee meeting for the foreseeable future. So instead of throwing that out there at the very end, after people have had to leave, I wanted to mention that now.
Steve,
Yes.
did you talk to Dorla about the city's RFP equity?
Yeah, Dorla was willing to, so I talked to Matt Leckel at one place, I talked to Dorla, I talked to Dave Feaster at the Community Foundation, and many of the, like Matt Leckel and the Community Foundation don't use RFPs. Dorla, at this point, what she was willing to do was to just review anything that we had and provide input on that, and I think that's fair at this point. And she didn't have a boilerplate or one that we could use. As Sarah said, as I was looking through there really isn't a one-size-fits-all of these type of RFPs, and I guess there's naive to kind of think there might be. But Dorla is willing to look at our proposals and provide feedback on that as well.
Does anybody have anything to add or opinions about kind of going back to the question of the time frame for these solicitations? I feel like that is a point that's kind of worth discussing through a kind of lens of equity, as far as what maybe are some of the constrictions that we are placing on people by choosing one type of time frame over another, by choosing, if we decide we're going to be open to accept bids or proposals for something for these specific 10 days, how far in advance is the best practice to announce that time frame, to give people time to prepare? But then also on the other side of that, how reasonably far out can we push something and expect our business functions to be able to for that to work well with with our vacancies as they come up, with our tenants being able to give 30 days notice, sometimes less, and do we want to have just an open time frame, shorter time frames, longer time frames, rolling admission or rolling, submissions?
I mean, I don't know if like 30 days seems like an appropriate time frame, but I think sometimes if people are thinking about so let's just take like a commercial space, for example, if they're thinking about this business idea that they've been throwing around, and I'd really like to do this, and then the space becomes available and it's like the perfect spot for their idea, and they're like, but I'm not ready with this yet. And even by saying, you have, RFP or anything else, it's just going to make them, probably less, shut down even more. But I really agree with the point of just saying, just contact us, instead of putting an immediate scary idea out there as to how it's going to happen, and then working with people individually. I think that's a much better way to approach things. And I don't know if 30 days is too long or not long enough. It just seems like that might be an appropriate time for people to get the information, let the information pass on amongst other people, start circulating, get to them, and them starting to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm at this point with it. I think I can move it, quickly here, and having an individual conversation with someone, I don't know, Steve, and deciding, what exactly they need help with to get them there in that amount of time. So that was kind of a ramble, but.
Yeah, I'd like to see like a hybrid of maybe a rolling RFP process with like a 30-day notification before, you know, final submissions are submitted. You know, so if someone does submit something and a year out and we need a little bit more information or something, maybe we can help them or get them to the right people to kind of help incubate their idea or get them ready to. But if we, you know, for anything, if we give 30 days notice of, you know, we need something, you know, maybe it would be easier where we can have a little bit of, I don't know. I think trying to keep it as open-ended as possible would be nice, just to kind of give more space for different ways of thinking.
And even maybe offer regularly, like quarterly, you know, in the future, some, like we were talking about earlier, some sort of quarterly class or something ongoing that people know they can count on it, and then they can start telling other people about it to prepare for future, and they know that it's going to be a consistent thing. I know that seems like a lot, but you know, every 6 months or whatever, you know, can happen where people can start saying, oh, the Vine does this 4 times a year or whatever, to help you get prepared.
Maybe also we could take up one place on their kind of repeated offers to really just partner with us in a lot of different ways. And I think that one thing we might be able to make more use of their resources with would be to refer potential prospective partnerships to them as a resource if they do need help with, you know, their business proposals or with any part of really a submission of whatever kind, in order to. Oh my gosh, did you just say that before I said that? I think I actually stole your thought. I'm sorry.
I'm contributing.
I think I might have stole that one. But yeah, and really just kind of let them know that might be coming down the pipeline when we do put out open calls, or when we have projects that are on the horizon, and send specific referrals over to them for one-on-one consultations, or maybe for whatever workshops they have going at the time. Maybe they would even be willing to put together a kind of a specific workshop, kind of tailored to prospective, you know, startup businesses and stuff like that.
Yeah. As we were discussing this, I thought, well, we're not really in a spot, like who's going to teach this class? I wasn't quite sure how that would work, but I think if we can let one place do what one place does really well, or invite one place to do it here even, that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable about opening our doors and inviting folks in.
Yeah.
I think we need to be, I don't think we're going to have a one size fits all for each type of proposal.
Yeah.
Because we also have to do these things with a mind to the fact that we're still have staff who are trying to run this as a business.
Yeah.
And so some things are going to be really amenable to a more open time frame. You know, for example, when we've done the art installations, that's often taken a really long time to work out the details. But if we have an empty commercial rental space, the longer we leave it open, or the more difficult we make the process of filling it, the harder it's going to be for our staff and the more money we're going to lose. So I think we have to let the process be flexible, but also just kind of not throw our staff's needs in doing their job out the window and how we establish it. I really like, Sarah, your idea of having just a listing. And I think we could pretty easily punt that to Stevens because they know what we're doing. Like they have their fingers in all of our pies. And if we said, hey, when something starts to percolate, just put it on there as like a potential thing that's coming, you know, have that, like you're talking about, a list of it. And as those projects progress, like we can update it, like, hey, we're at the stage where we're ready to start thinking about how we're going to fill it. And here's an informational / training thing we're doing to meet that need of getting that project finished, whatever it is. I mean, it's going to work better probably for, if we're on a timeline like where we were with the paving project and we've got a bunch of deadlines stacked up, we don't have a lot of flexibility if we're going to do the job, if we're going to get it done and we're going to get the funding. But there's places where we have a lot of flexibility and we can make that happen. But if we don't, like you're saying, I'm hearing a lot of ideas, but I think there are things that are actionable items that we could push to the forefront, like right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like we could make a list right now of all the things that we're anticipating coming and put it on Facebook, or have a list, like a link to a Google document that shows it right now.
Yeah, Maggie, I think that would be great. And oh, sorry, Aaron.
No, you're good.
I just think that, yeah, and that's what I was kind of thinking, is kind of something open that people could submit their information. I think the tricky thing is going to be with like expiring contact information or proposals or things like that are submitted. Because I think what's tricky is the outreach piece, and that kind of, if people can, if you're an HVAC contractor, you can submit your information so we can contact you when we're looking for work. It's just going to be updating that list to make sure that it's relevant. Sorry, Aaron.
You're good. I also wanted to say too that like, I know that we all really, really want to get this right. And it is highly probable that we will not get it right on the very first go. But we got to do something and we got to do our best. This is more of a pep talk than an idea. But I think that, I mean, we got to do the best we can do with the information we have right now. And I'm sure we will receive feedback on the process and we will continue to iterate. But I worry that we're gonna spend a lot of time spinning our wheels and not come up with an RFP process. Yes, thank you to this. Yes, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. Someone very wise told me that. I didn't get any. I only got like one chuckle for that pun, last name pun. All right, cool, that's fine. It's all good.
People are muted.
Oh my God, I didn't even get it. Now I get it. Oh, that's really good, actually. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I mean, I think that it would, like, let's pick a time frame, and if it totally doesn't work, then we try something else the next time. You know.
Yeah.
Something that I want to nail down very concisely and just kind of resolve once and for all, because this is not, we don't have a established policy for our commercial vacancies, because the last time we wrote policies, we didn't have commercial units. And what we've been doing is this ad hoc application of our really outdated financial procedures from the 1990s and applying those to our existing business operations that they don't really apply to. And so we have this kind of threshold, this dollar threshold. Any bid over, any project over a certain dollar threshold requires 3 bids, and that is a really good piece to consider as part of our procurement policy, but it's not appropriate to just automatically have to very loosely translate that to oversight of our commercial property. And I think one thing that we could do tonight, very specifically, is nail down what is that procedure for commercial vacancies, and make sure that there is a uniform procedure in place for each one, because there's not a one size fits all for everything, but we do, for equity and fairness, need to apply the same rubric for that to all of our vacancies. And so the question has come up case by case, and you know, I don't know how far back you have to go before there were a boatload of leases that were written with tenants for which there was not an open RFP made, and I don't know that even all of them in the last 2 to 3 years have been through that process. But it actually came up, as a question just for this most recent vacancy. And so we need, as a board, to be able to give a concrete direction on, at very minimum, you know, does every commercial vacancy require an open RFP process? Does it require for us to solicit for, you know, for tenants to the public in whatever way we decide, you know, that strategy plays out, but we don't really even have a concrete policy to refer to when that comes up right now. So that's something, maybe a really concrete starting point. We need to just say, you know, are there counterpoints to this? I think that precedent shows that we have tended towards doing an RFP for all commercial vacancies. We had a kind of unique situation come up this time that really gave a valid kind of tension to debating that in a circumstance where a person who is an employee of one of our current tenants and a tenant of our residential property was wanting to seek a lease for the space that was becoming available. And it was kind of like, well, does this business just really transition naturally into this almost exactly the same business with this guy who already works in this space? Does that require an RFP? And you know, I think there are maybe nuances that are going to always challenge us, but there needs to be a uniform something on the books to refer to, so that staff doesn't have to feel shaky about it or feel like they're kind of improvising every time it comes up, because that's not fair to them. And that can make them have to deal with any repercussions as though it was just their discretionary decision. They need a policy that they can refer to. If I have to do my job, I don't want to have to deal with like all the liability that comes along with just having to improvise every decision that comes along.
I totally agree. It was pretty hairy last time and would love to avoid such a situation again. In the interest of equity and also in the interest of less headaches for all of us. Those two things often go together.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess I think I would probably propose that there's going to be people who are put out no matter what the policy is. But personally, I think that erring on the side of transparency and openness would lend us to requiring an open submission for every commercial vacancy across the board. I think that even clients who have a really super established relationship with us, or prospective tenants who do, hopefully can understand that our property is not just a private, you know, equity entity where we are trying to just make the most profitable decisions every time, and that we are kind of subject to aligning with a mission to do what's best for our neighborhood. And so I guess that's where I feel about it, but I also know, you know, maybe there are arguments on both sides. So maybe just like a little discussion of the pros and cons of where we want to fall with this, but we do need to kind of set it in writing.
Yeah, that would be well received.
It's my opinion that anytime anything comes up for availability, it should be presented to the public.
I'm sorry, Jared, to whom? I didn't get to hear that.
It should be presented public facing, whether we do an RFP or just an announcement. I think that, yeah. Furthermore, Jen and I have discussed photographing the residential spaces as well as the commercial spaces, and just getting those on the website, as these are spaces that exist, whether they're available or not. I think that's a good idea. We've talked about it in the past. I'll take ownership of the fact that it was an ask that I sort of was supposed to go forward with, and I never got around to really moving forward on. But I think that's I guess I'm just sort of reassigning myself that homework in terms of getting something on the website that sort of just presents our offerings, whether they're available or not.
Thanks, Jared. Also alternatively, if there are any struggles that come up with that process, a floor plan at minimum is a pretty standard, acceptable alternative. Just kind of having a template in place if we are I think that's a good point that you kind of led naturally into, is that if we do establish that we require an RFP for any vacancy, presumably under our 30-day notice policy, we should be able to just say that within X number of days, we can go ahead and just automatically post that as soon as we receive the notice to vacate or the notice of non-renewal, and have a easily postable, saved document, image, all of that stuff just ready to go for each of our units, so that we don't have any improvisation or any hangups or delays at the time.
Is there any reason why we couldn't just have a standing list of all of our rental units with their status?
That's sort of what I'm implying, is that's what I would like to do.
So it's not like, the action required would be update the status. Open for rent as of this date, accepting proposals, whichever.
Right. It would also sort of give a shoot or get off the point mechanism into leases, which would be helpful for our property management. Basically saying, like, if we don't, if we don't get a re-signed lease at this point, then this will automatically trigger an RFP, and that might be helpful in the future. Just making sure that we have continuity in renting our parcels.
Thanks. That's a really good point.
I think the 10-day period that we're on right now for an RFP seems to make sense. Because I know we talked about a little bit about, how long of a time frame do we give people? But if someone submits that they're no longer going to be able to, it's tricky because it's 10 days seems like a quick turnaround. But if someone submits it gives a 30-day notice, that's 1/3 of the time that we have to kind of get that place up to snuff. So I don't know. 10 days seems good.
That was sort of my implication, was that we could write into leases moving forward.
Yeah. Speaking as a property manager, I can tell you the day that I get a notice to vacate, that day or the very next day is when I'm calling my prospective tenant who's at the top of my waiting list. So there's no reason we can't just have a nearly immediate turnaround time once we do get that 30-day notice, and really just kind of have a predictable time frame that's somewhat more consistent than what we've operated within. As far as knowing, okay, we should expect a 30-day notice. We should expect to be able to make that available to the public within a day or two of that notice. And then, we have X amount of time to turn the property. We can estimate the availability date, but, there's really just been a lot of also uncertainty around those timeframes in the past, I think, because of the lack of this process being consistent. I guess what I want to maybe just put out there, is there any dissenting opinion around the idea of a uniform requirement for RFP for every commercial vacancy, maybe within a 3 business day time frame, 2 business day, I don't know, whatever that needs to be, of a notice to vacate or a notice of non-renewal. Does anybody oppose to that? Do we want to do kind of an unofficial endorsement of that for this policy? I can also just kind of take people's feedback as it is and use my discretion to plug that in with a draft that I think Steve and I can put together based on everybody's feedback tonight and what we have established already.
So Steve,
Yes.
you think, I agree with what you're saying, Sarah. And do you think that we could punt it maybe to Nicole, who probably doesn't have a ton of events type things barreling down at her, to go around and start collecting at least like a storefront facade picture?
Absolutely.
And maybe a standard picture of what one of the rental units look like, even though they're all, I'm guessing, relatively similar to each other in layout and facilities for the residential units? Or
Yeah, no, I think actually they vary. There's some differences for sure.
okay.
Nicole is on vacation this week, but I will definitely bring that up with her. I think that's entirely within her.
And then if she can compile that and maybe get from Jen a list of the rental contracts and plug in the dates when those contracts expire,
Yeah.
start building some of this. And then the piece that would kind of operationalize this is what Sarah's saying, is like, as soon as we get notice that something's going to expire, and that would also be part of looking at what exactly do our rental contracts say. Like,
Yeah.
do we have any wording in there that gives us an idea of when they need to let us know? Is it just 30 days notice? Is it your lease ends, right? Because we know when the lease is going to end. Is there any wording in those leases about when does your lease need to be renewed in order to save your space? That would be the piece that would tell us the thing you're asking about right now, Sarah, right?
Yeah.
So if we have all of that information together for all of our rental properties, commercial and tenant, then we've already gotten halfway to being able to just stick this whole thing online and people can look. And then if we're concomitantly running like a wait list for people who want to get into our residence, because that was one of our specific sort of things we got pinged on, is like, well, how do you fill them? Oh, well, the people leaving Utah was knowing someone. Well, it would be a lot fairer if we had a list and it was at least first come, first serve, which is still going to operate somewhat on who do you know, because you're going to tell your friend, hey, I live in this great place, get on the wait list. But at least if it's publicly available, other people can get on the wait list at least, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with the wait list. I think that's
like right now, and we do have a staff person that we're paying who doesn't have much to do other than that right now, right?
Right. Yep. One sensitivity in this conversation, or one thing that I want to at least make people aware of, is we have received not blowback, but we have had tenants that do not want their lease, do not want folks knowing that their lease is expiring, because then there's a parade of folks coming in and out of their buildings, taking pictures, and we've had, I'm thinking of some of our tenants on the Vine Street side. They don't want to be constantly asking questions. Robert's leaving from the barber shop, and he has definitely told us, please do not come in, please do not post anything until I go, because he does not want a whole parade of folks coming in. Now, we can address that through leases moving forward and say, as the leasing agency, we reserve the right to, or we would like to work with you on whatever the dialogue is we come up with. But I do want to put out there that if we decide to go down this road, we have had people in the past, we have had tenants in the past say, no, I'm not comfortable with you putting a sign in my window, and I'm not comfortable with you having people come in here and look around or tell people. With some of our previous tenants, now we reserve the right to kind of make the vocabulary of what we're looking for, but just some awareness.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't have the familiarity or expertise in commercial real estate to speak to that, but we definitely would want to consider kind of best practices, if not legalities, surrounding that potential situation.
Yeah.
I don't know, Aaron, do you have any sort of insight into whether there's any sort of standard contractual practice, industry standard for the time frame of posting commercial vacancies?
This Aaron?
Sorry, yeah, Aaron H.
This Aaron doesn't know anything about that. So.
Sorry. Our real estate agent expert.
So I don't have a lot of expertise in rentals. However, I will tell you that if you're trying to show a house, that's for sale with renters in it, it can be tricky, and it's automatically known that it's less accessible. You have to give more notice. Tenants don't like it, but it still has to be done in order to sell that house. So I don't really know what the solution is. For me as a realtor, if I were looking at it as I were listing a house and I was trying to work for the seller and they have tenants in it, you know, my responsibility is to get the house sold, and I don't know that waiting until they move out it's super rare. Like, because a lot of times you're in a tenant lease and you're selling it, and you know, you have to negotiate the legality behind the tenants that are in it. Like, you can buy this house, but these tenants are going to be here for 4 more months after you take ownership. Do you want to take on this new lease? Like, there's always these whole different scenarios. But for me, from my perspective, if I were a tenant and my lease were up in August, I would not, and from a landlord perspective, and I'm just saying this maybe blindly, I don't know if this is right or wrong, I would definitely want someone to have access to show that property, and I would allow it as a tenant. Because if not, and in real estate, like, time is vital. And so if you're looking at, you know, August, they move out, then you're getting it ready to show. I mean, you're losing a month, and then you're losing really, you could lose several months before you get like a tenant in there again. So I don't know what the legalities are behind tenants having to show in this situation. But I would say that I get, like, you know, like using Rob as an example, I get that he doesn't want people to know and come in, but does that mean until he's gone? Like, is he gone?
So it actually, just as an update, I happened to have this copy of our commercial lease tucked away in a folder over behind me, and was able to locate, at least within this copy that Jen sent me. I don't know that all of our commercial leases read this exact same way, but this lists the renewal timeframe of as 120 days, meaning that if the tenant decides to extend the term of the lease beyond the initial time frame, then they need to give written notice to request that 120 days prior to the expiration of the lease. My guess, though, is that what ends up happening a lot of the time is that we might not get that 120-day advance renewal request. And then we get to maybe 45 or 60 days out. And at that point, given that we haven't already leased the space, we agree to renew it if they request to at that point. With anybody who's ever on the fence, I'm sure that probably can happen, you know, even within that requirement. We would basically just be giving kind of leniency on that requirement if we haven't renewed the space already. But if that's a fact, if that's true that we have kind of a 120-day time frame that we're looking at, what we could propose possibly, and it would be really, I guess, valuable to run all of this past Jen and get her kind of feedback on how that has played out in the past. But possibly if we have that, you know, let us know with it 120 days in advance. If by 60 days in advance, we have not confirmed your renewal, then at that point, you know, maybe we make the notice available. If by 30 days in advance, you know, we still have not confirmed your renewal, I feel like that would be pretty reasonable. But yeah, I think we would also want to kind of jump into the technicalities of what would be really required to respect the established tenant space during that time frame. Brendan?
So I just had a couple things. I have to actually jump off the Zoom call in a minute. But before I left, I don't think we actually have to post the actual date that their lease is up with, maybe just month. And on the website as well, say that to tour any of the locations has to all go through us, so we can still brokerage those, those things that might come through if it's Jen or whoever is in that position, that we talk to that tenant and say, hey, can we bring some people through, versus just people tour in their space. And then it's not specifically down to a time someone sees it and then goes, I want to go see this space, I'm just going to barge in,
Yep.
And then another thing on our request for proposal policy right here, I just see it's pretty open-ended on the time frame. It says no fewer than 15 days, which seems like 15 days seems like a long period of time. But then it also is pretty open-ended for us to extend it. There's no really idea of how long we would extend it, which is kind of interesting. It would be I could see it extend or 15 days, and then you can extend, or you can go another 15 days and then close. And then another quick thing that I saw in here was that submissions of proposal we didn't have in person. So it says accept proposals by UPS, and FedEx, or by email.
That one I've already got noted on here.
Okay, perfect. I just thought that was, and then if there's any other.
Need to add that.
Good catch. Yeah, good catch.
Unless we're closing the doors for anyone, so.
Which we have technically, but.
Well, I gotta go, but I'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, I definitely want to wrap up within the next few minutes here. I think we were kind of hoping to go till 7, but we ran late with a kind of unexpected, really huge platform of earlier things to talk about. I think we kind of I have a pretty clear takeaway from what people have said tonight for this piece of the process and the policy. Maybe going back to I guess the question of what is a RFP? What is a request for proposal? Like, are we looking at a preference towards just contact us? Because Aaron H., I know you mentioned a little while ago the sort of like, well, if we just put out a word that is something more in the realm of, well, contact us about the availability of this space. Well, number one, we avoid having to be very specific and identifying the specific vacancy and the details for that existing tenant. But we also kind of, with that time frame, I think that gives us a good chunk of time within which to have the discussions with the prospective tenant or client or partner and flesh out the proposal that we're going to be requesting from them, or what that is going to look like. And it also gives us a super fast possibility for turning around and just putting something out there. It's a lot easier, I think, for Jen or for Steve to post a a request for bids or a request for opportunity posting, whatever we want to call it, if really all we have to say is, we have this opportunity, contact us about it. Do we want to go further and towards that kind of minimalist approach and leaving it much more open to interpretation of what is acceptable? Or do we, we also have the possibility of this very, very detailed policy that I emailed everybody, something more along those lines, and then there's everything in between. So kind of any last thoughts about where we want to fall on that spectrum?
I feel like the more wordy and detailed it is, the less equitable it becomes. So if you know, if someone's, I don't want to put stoppers on anyone that's like is intimidating or feels like it's too big of a thing. I feel like I really like the idea of having a conversation and explaining what's going on, and then being able to kind of handhold through what the processes are, and immediately offering sources and having those sources readily available. Because I just feel like I just think that if you even come out with anything that sounds like unfamiliar, or it's just a stopper.
Yeah. And really, we're not looking to lease to Jimmy John's, you know, like we want the most basic, like don't even maybe have your business status yet at all. You know, we want to foster those birth stages of like ground level organizations. And to do that, we can't really expect them to have all the legalese to come at us with.
So
I really like the idea of that minimalist approach. And what it kind of makes me realize is that maybe we took our policy and we put all of the requirements onto the prospective partner, and we kind of took a lot of it off of ourselves. So maybe we rewrite a pretty detailed policy, but those requirements are requirements we make of ourselves, not requirements that we make of the people who are wanting to partner with us, who are wanting to start something. They have a lot of work they're already going to be involved in. And we do have some very specific requirements we need to put on ourselves. So I think that if we're going to flesh out the policy, it needs to be the elements of it that we are going to be requiring of our own procedures internally.
I mentioned it to someone who I just wanted to just mention the space is available. I don't even think it's the right space for them. And they were immediately like, oh, I have this idea, but I don't have my website ready, and I don't have this, and I'm not sure about this. And so there's always these automatic insecurities that it.
Yeah.
I want to say that we're, like Jen and I, as we've talked about it, we're very supportive of the RFP process. We think it'll be very helpful. The scenarios that you guys have talked about for the last half hour is pretty much exactly what we did for the past 5 years. Like we deliberately partnered with people that didn't propose, that didn't have the perfect RFPs, and that came in and had conversations. So when we do that to some extent, this RFP process may cloud that, and it may prohibit some of those conversations. But ultimately, both Jen and I, we feel like this is a really good process to begin for the health of the organization on the long term, and that it removes some of the personal out of it. And so if it's an opportunity for everyone, then it should be kind of couched, I guess, as that. But we were very deliberate about making sure who had the opportunities here. We could have rented it out to some sort of vape store. We had all the opportunities in the world to put Subways and things in here, but we were very deliberate about what we didn't do. Mm-hmm. So we're in harmony with this. We need some of this stuff plugged in on this RFP so that we can actually move forward on it, and that Jen has a clear sort of path as to how this goes down.
Would you say though that maybe a big picture, getting it out to more people that know about it is one huge hurdle?
Yeah,
from the past.
There were limits to what we did before out of here, and definitely the environment has changed. No one thought of this as a business entity. We had to prove people that this was not just a nonprofit hub. So as these things have taken off, and there are businesses that were here 5 years ago that are no longer here, that none of us can name, that just didn't make it. Well, one of us in this particular group could name one of the businesses that is no longer there, but sorry, Jared. Yeah, I think that helps. When we talked about this RFP proposal, we thought about some of the folks that we've worked with, and we didn't, we weren't sure how to help make sure that their RFP proposal really got the same look as someone else's that did go to Lincoln's class and did have it on letterhead and all this other stuff, because that was not who that's not who we envisioned as being the tenants here. We were very deliberate in trying to make sure that this was a place where people had an opportunity to get their foot in the door. And then if they decided that they wanted to go elsewhere, that's great. But until then, I mean, we've been very deliberate about who we're having conversations with and trying to make sure that there are opportunities to folks out there. Having said that, that doesn't mean that there aren't blind spots, and I can't have conversations with people that I don't know, that don't know to come in here and do this. But one of my concerns about the RFP is that it may be difficult for some potential candidates to have their proposals looked at if they're a very, very new startup business, and you have someone say we have someone that comes for Robert's shop, and this person has 30 years of barbershop experience and blah, 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 blah. But we've got someone like Jerome who's busting his ass over there right now, trying to make it work, and who also lives upstairs. And we're like, well, how do we make sure that Jerome gets a shot at that? Because on paper, they're not going to look like the same proposal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's something that occurs on our end too.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you said earlier, Erin.
Yeah.
This is not going to be flawless. And even with some of my initial hesitations, they're not really hesitations. It's just a different way of doing things, and it's a better way of doing things for the organization in the long run and in the big picture. It's just a different way for us to kind of do right now.
Totally. I wonder what it would look like for us to do a standard bid process or a standard bid, whatever, and then include a clause that's like, we are all about incubating small businesses. We are committed to helping your dream come alive. Don't let imposter syndrome stop you from applying.
Yeah.
Something like that, to have a standardized process, but also include language that lowers the barrier to entry and reassures folks.
More welcoming.
And to also have a commitment in there that like, we are going to do, we're going to do the best to have an equitable process that takes all things into consideration, not just a nice website and whatever.
I think the standardized process, the application process, can be a part of the application, but it has to be a component of the application. It can't be the only thing.
Yeah, I think I like that what you're all describing is that thing that's somewhere in between those two ends of the spectrum, where we're not exactly just saying call us, but we can also do a lot more to make things sound a lot more accessible and be a lot more accessible for everyone. But I also think that we can maybe pare down what we have as our sort of semi-daunting list of requirements that's in our current posting, and just kind of make it a little bit more towards that minimalist end, add that language in there. And I think that the less we put out there in terms of requirements before people even get to our door, not only are we creating more accessibility and equity, but we're also, I think, empowering our staff to use their better judgment and their discretion in ways that we are trusting them with, instead of kind of a bit of a more micromanaging approach by, not really allowing Jen and Steve and whoever comes down the road to make discretionary decisions that might not always fit into those boxes that we put in our list of requirements. And our list of requirements, again, I think like if we're going to spend some time being exhaustive about that, really we need to look more inward and direct those at our requirements, not in what we're putting out there to the public, but the policy and the process for what are we doing as an organization before we're getting it out to the public, and then what do we do with it after we collect what comes from the public, and then how do we make sure that it is all executed fairly from beginning to end. So
yeah,
I think we focused a lot on that kind of that posting that's just like our advertising flyer for it, but who, where we're sending that flyer is just as important as what's on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Well, I have a lot of notes. So hopefully I caught most of what came after our minutes will expire for this evening, but I think we can come up with something. I think Steve and I will work on that and hopefully be able to, by the August executive committee meeting, board meeting, be able to bring something forward. Having, I think, trying to take Dorla up on her offer to give it a set of eyes and make sure that she can help fill in our blind spots in this, which I think will probably be an important part of polishing up our draft, and then move on to another piece of it for August. If y'all don't mind taking maybe one more minute, I would like to just solicit for feedback on, I think we really tackled our commercial tenant RFP process pretty heavily tonight. But I kind of want to bring it back to the fact that we have a whole lot more pieces to the puzzle of like creating equity in our organization and our operations. So, you know, we also have, we have a resident selection plan. I think our residential leases are pretty stable right now. So I don't know that rises to the top of priorities. But we have a procurement policy for contract bids. We've definitely got a lot of those coming up, and some really big ones potentially, having just submitted that $120,000 Gilmore grant the other day and hoping that comes down the pipeline. We have creating some guidelines for our public projects and art installations, other installations and opportunities like that. And then kind of coming up with a streamline or uniform process, maybe a more thorough thought process for how we want to be intentional with our fiduciary relationships. Maybe 6th and 7th pieces of that puzzle that I did not include in this brainstorm list off the top of my head. And then also, importantly, that's not really exactly one of these things, but kind of a bigger picture thing, is creating a board calendar, or maybe an organizational calendar. These are all things for future working sessions of this executive committee meeting, 30 to 60 minutes per. This one was more on the 60 to 75 minutes per. But thanks so much for your time. And any of those things jump out at you for August, even if you can't make it in August, you know, what do you think that the VNA really, like, what are one or two of those that they seem like the most time sensitive, like got to get that done sooner?
I will say that a community calendar feels like an easy get, an easy win, because we already have one. We just don't update it very well. And I think that, I mean, that is something that's especially important in our increasingly virtual world, to have, you know, folks up to date on what it is that's going on. So.
Yes. You know what? Actually, I'm sorry. I took for granted that not everybody even participated in initial conversations about that. But so this calendar that I was referring to in that context, the board calendar being kind of our internal activities for the year. Mm-hmm. What month do we plug in to start working on our budget? What month do we plug in to file our taxes?
Okay, I understand now.
And what are we working on month to month as a board? I think though, like actually, now that you mention it, we could probably tackle those things together. And some of there's some overlap in all of that as well. As far as what are the things that occur recurringly that are kind of out there in the world, because all of those are also responsibilities that we take on as an organization. So I think that's another element of that's part of it. We could probably do it all together, really. If we're going to have a neighborhood sale, we should have that in our sights and make sure that it's not going to be 2 days before our budget is due, you know. So but
that makes sense.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's actually what I was kind of leaning towards too, like the calendar, get it established. And then honestly, we could even plug those other line items into that calendar as board goals, as committee goals. Thank you so much. This was super helpful. I suffer a little bit from decision paralysis in trying to come up with any sort of like these policies without at least having like a healthy, you know, feedback session where I hear everyone's good ideas and can kind of like, you know, say that y'all came up with it a little bit. But we got some really good ideas to plug into this that we absolutely would not have come up with. So thank you so much.
Thanks,
guys.
Yeah.
And see y'all next week. Have a wonderful weekend, rest of your week.
I did want to put in a plug that they are Zooming the Citizens Police Action Review Board meeting tonight, and that started at 6. So
Saw that. Yeah.
Saw that too.
Yeah, check it out.
Good to know.
Trying not to look. Trying to.
I served on that fraudulent fallacy for 6 years, so I've much like our discussion about going down to KDPS, I've had enough. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love 3 hours of positive progressive action on behalf of KDPS. I don't really want to hear their words. I would love to see them do something.
I wouldn't mind 3 hours of them answering questions that we submit to them in advance.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. The thing that seems to be the hardest from where I'm sitting in the conversations with them, having with them, is that they still seem to think that they're going to dictate this conversation. And I think what we're saying is like, no, you're invited to the table, but you don't get to dictate. That is where we are right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've said this before, but it bears repeating, Steve. I really appreciate you being a staff member and leader of this organization that feels comfortable being like, no, this is what the narrative is, and this is what our organization is going to say. And I'm happy to have a conversation with the police chief if she's got a problem with that.
Yeah,
so,
no, I'm super proud
awesome.
of you. I'm super proud of the board. I feel like we're doing things that need to be done, and this is what my position calls for right now. I've at times carried the water for public safety, and the flip side of that coin is that when we say like, no, we need to have a conversation, my hope is that they respect that. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course.
I'm crushing this thing. We're out of here. I'm ending it.
I appreciate all of you. I'm disappearing straight into the sun right now, so I will keep on and have a wonderful rest of your night.
Excellent. Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Talk to you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks.